etc., I can't have plaque accumulation. And as long as I stay metabolically fit and healthy, then it's not a concern. Like, are these people just completely neglecting everything intentionally to not make their diet models seem bad? Or like, what do you think is like, I just have a hard time wrapping my head around somebody who has almost a self-induced familial hypercholesterolemia level from their carnivore diet saying something like, don't worry about it.
I don't know that I can answer that question, and I certainly have spent some time in the past trying to understand
Mm-hmm.
that, and I've even used the example of FH to try to make the point, right? So for people watching us who don't know what that is, so FH is a disease called familial hypercholesterolemia, and it's actually the second most common genetic cause of atherosclerosis.
Mm-hmm.
Now, it's a disease, it's a genetic disease, but it's a polygenic disease, and it's very heterogeneous, meaning it's not like, Huntington's disease, where there's one gene that causes the disease, or even LPA, where the single LPA gene leads to elevated LP little a, which is actually the most common familial form of atherosclerosis. Here, you have literally thousands of different mutations that all produce the same phenotype. And the disease is defined by the phenotype, not the genotype. So FH is defined by having an LDL cholesterol greater than 190 milligrams per deciliter. So, what do we know about people with familial hypercholesterolemia? Well, we know that regardless of their metabolic status, regardless of their inflammation, regardless of how high their HDL is and how low their triglycerides are, and all the other things that people in this camp want to talk about.
Okay, the proceeding was a little snippet taken from an interview between a guy named Derrick, and I don't know Derrick's last name. He's the more plates, more dates guy now of Merrick Health, and Derrick made a name for himself doing all the Izzy on steroids type of stuff, and that was his claim to fame for many years. And of course, he's interviewing a guy named Peter Attia, who probably many of you guys are familiar with him. But Peter has sort of positioned himself as sort of a longevity guru, so to speak, and so a lot of people have a respect for his opinion, and he has clearly been in the camp of, it's incredibly important to lower LDL cholesterol, and that is in, sort of beyond sort of question, I suppose. And the topic du jour was, what about these crazy carnivores that are going on thinking that if they take care of their metabolic health and then they're okay and they're protected from the ill effects of LDL cholesterol. Now, to be fair, you'll never hear me say that you should ignore LDL cholesterol or it doesn't matter in this situation. But a couple of the points that Peter brings up, which I think I'm not sure that they are unquestionable. And one of the things he talks about is this sort of condition called familial hypercholesterolemia, which is a sort of a genetic disease that has, as he explains, many genetic causes or many genetic polymorphisms that lead to the expression of high cholesterol. And in many cases, that has been shown to lead to worse cardiovascular outcomes, rapid development of atherosclerotic heart disease, sometimes at very young ages. We see people that just, have heart attacks as teenagers. So that's very unusual. And so this has been used as a model. Now, first of all, my first sort of concern around that is equating FH, a genetic disease, with dietary-induced hypercholesterolemia is not the same thing. This is an apples to orange comparison. Now, again, the LDL is high in both cases, but the analogy I'll say is, if I take a bullet and I fire it from a gun into your head, it's going to cause some problems, right? It might kill you, right? There's a serious problem with that. But if I take that same bullet and I just throw it at you, right? Same bullet, but it's a very different overall situation. You might get annoyed, you might get pissed off they threw a bullet at you, but the bullet didn't kill you, right? So again, this isn't an exact analogy, but you kind of get this sense that is a genetic disease the same thing as an environmentally induced disease? And I would say probably not. I think that's a fair statement to say. Now, it could be. Now, it could be the same effect. Now, again, I don't think we definitively know. Now, another thing he points out too is that there is this belief that FH is always always associated with a worse outcome, cardiovascular disease. Doesn't matter if you're insulin sensitive, lean, high, low blood pressure, low triglycerides, whatever. When the reality is that's not necessarily true. I mean, there's studies, for instance, this study here where they looked at FH and its progression with disease. Now he maintains that there's this area under the curve phenomenon. How high is it, and how long are you exposed to it, right? If you have high LDL cholesterol over a long period of time, you will develop cardiovascular disease. That is the sort of the theory, I suppose. Now, this study here looked at people, and they found that while it was indeed true there was an increase for cardiovascular disease with those with FH, it sort of peaked at younger ages. And then as you got older, that effect sort of attenuated. It went away. So why would that be? Because that's time exposure, right? The longer you're exposed to it, an old person certainly exposed to it a lot longer than a younger person. Why would you not see high rates or even higher rates in the older population? So what explains that particular phenomenon? And there's a number of studies with FH which show that many of these people actually do live to a relatively long lifespan. And there was a recent sort of case report on a 100-year-old with FH with elevated LDL cholesterol for 100 years with no negative outcome. Now that's one case. I got an uncle that smokes for 100 years, and he's that's obvious. You can't hang your hat on that, but there does seem to be some level of protection conferred to some people. And this is another point he makes, is that the first I go on, he talks about Mendelian randomization studies, as if they are infallible. Well, there are a lot of problems with Mendelian randomization studies. There's a lot of limitations, and there's problems with interpretation and so on and so forth, as this paper sort of indicates here. So it's not a gold standard by any stretch of the imagination, and there's definitely limitations to its usage. But the thought that there is, he says, is there a protective effect? Is there some level of protective effect that outweighs the negative to LDL cholesterol? In my mind, certainly I think it offsets some of the effect. I think that's really probably incontrovertible that you can mitigate some of the effect of LDL cholesterol by not smoking, by exercising, by having good glycemic control, by having low inflammation, by having normal blood pressure. I think that's a pretty safe sort of area to be on. And the question is, does that override the net effect of elevated LDL cholesterol? And let's look at this recent study. This is the Danish Heart Registry, where they found that people that had coronary artery calcium versus no coronary artery calcium, so CAC score 0 versus a non-zero score. The people that had a 0 score, the LDL cholesterol essentially did not seem to matter significantly for any kind of what's called a MACE event, major adverse cardiac event. And so there does to be, and the authors conclude, in there, that there does seem to be some level of protective effect. It doesn't take away the causality of LDL cholesterol and its role in atherosclerotic disease, but there does seem to be a protective effect. And the question is, how large of a protective effect is it, and what is the derivation of that protective effect? Is it genetic, or is it a lifestyle factor, or is it a combination of the above? Probably likely the latter, right? So the other thing is, why not just do your carnivore diet and just take a statin? Well, I think that one, and I think for good reason, a lot of people don't trust the pharmaceutical industry. I mean, that's just the way it is. I mean, these guys have been shown to be criminally corrupt in many, many cases. They've been shown to commit fraud in research and lie to the public to sell more product. That is clear. So a lot of people just don't have a trust for that. Additionally, there are side effects. These are very real, and for some people they've been significant. Now, I mean, again, the pharmaceutical industry tries to downplay that. So there is this sort of overall mistrust of pharmacy, which I think is justified in many cases, not all cases, but in many cases. And I think there is also clearly a protective effect. Now, again, it's like, are you rolling the dice a little bit? Sure, you are, about a lot of things. I mean, that is life. You make decisions based on what you think is the best for your particular situation. Again, I've talked to, literally thousands of people on this carnivore diet, and I talked to them about, very specifically, your cardiovascular risk could be higher because of increased exposure to LDL. And they get that. Some of them don't believe it. Some of them don't care. And the reason they don't care is because their health has improved so significantly that they don't want to go back to the diet that gave them good LDL, or they don't want to take medications for the reasons we've discussed previously. So again, this is why, for people asking, why are these people doing it? Now, again, you're not going to ever hear me saying, ignore LDL cholesterol, it doesn't matter. But do I believe that there are some protective effects from having otherwise good health? Yes, I do. Do I believe that they potentially may completely offset the effects of LDL cholesterol? I don't know that. I don't know that for sure. Maybe we'll find out. Maybe this lean mass hyperresponder study will give us some more insight on that. I doubt, honestly, that Peter Attia is going to be convinced, or not that it matters, but by the lean mass hyperresponder study, however it comes out. If it comes out and shows that these people actually, their atherosclerotic burden actually not only didn't progress, but even reversed. Maybe it even reverses, for the few that actually had a little bit of plaque. Then how would you respond to that? Again, I think they're going to say, well, we've got this overwhelming literature. Most of it, to be honest, has been paid for by drug companies. I mean, that's just the reality of how research is done. So anyway, in short, that's a little bit of a response there, guys. So hopefully this may make sense to these people that are questioning it, why people would feel this way. I think it's not so clear cut. I am certainly willing to accept that I could be wrong. Now, I don't know if some of these other people think they're right and there's no chance they could be wrong. I think that's a little bit, perhaps a little arrogant, perhaps. But anyway, we'll see. We'll see what happens. And again, this is life. This is what it's about. You never know. There's no certainties in life except death, right? All right, guys. You guys take care. We'll talk to you soon.